The invitation came on a Thursday afternoon, tucked neatly inside an envelope with my boss's elegant handwriting across it. She rarely invited employees into her private world, and when she did, it was usually for professional reasons: business dinners, networking events, or client parties. But this one was different. It said only, Saturday, 7 p.m. My place. Private gathering. Be there. I held the envelope in my hands for several minutes, staring at it as if it might reveal some hidden meaning. My heart raced a little. She was my boss after all, and I admired her more than I cared to admit. Strict, intelligent, magnetic. She had a way of commanding attention in every room she entered. Yet I had never imagined she'd invite me into her personal life this way. I wondered if I should decline, but the truth was, curiosity got the better of me. Saturday came, and I found myself standing outside her large modern house, my hands trembling slightly as I rang the bell. The moment the door opened, warmth spilled out. Laughter, music, the clinking of glasses. She greeted me herself, wearing a sleek black dress, her hair swept back, her smile deliberate. "You came," she said softly, her hand brushing mine as she led me inside. The party was grander than I had expected. Elegant chandeliers dripped golden light across the living room, where sophisticated guests mingled. Politicians, business owners, people I had only ever read about in magazines. The air smelled of expensive perfume and fine wine. I felt out of place at first, my modest dress paling in comparison to the gowns around me, but my boss made sure to introduce me with pride. "She's one of my brightest," she said, and I flushed under the attention. But it wasn't just the guests or the wealth that unsettled me. It was her. My boss's elder sister. I had heard of her before. An accomplished CEO of a rival company, a woman whose name carried weight in the industry. She was older, striking, her presence almost commanding the room more than the hostess herself. When I first caught sight of her, she was surrounded by a small group, speaking with calm authority, her tailored suit making her appear both intimidating and impossibly stylish. And then it happened. Her eyes found mine. It was only a moment, but it lingered. A sharp, deliberate glance that seemed to strip me bare. I looked away quickly, embarrassed, yet my heart beat faster than it should have. Throughout the evening, it happened again, our gazes colliding across the room, holding just a second too long before breaking apart. I tried to ignore it, focusing instead on conversations with colleagues and guests, but I could feel her watching me. When I excused myself to fetch another drink, I noticed her move as well. She wasn't following me, not directly, but her presence seemed to orbit close enough to brush against mine. At one point, as I laughed politely at a joke someone told, I sensed her standing only a few feet away, listening. I felt both honored and nervous under that weight. I told myself it was nothing. She was a powerful woman, used to observing people, used to commanding attention. Why would she take an interest in me, a junior employee in her sister's company? And yet, the glimmer in her eyes when they met mine again said otherwise. By the time dessert was served, I found it harder to concentrate on the conversations around me. My boss had drifted to another circle of friends, leaving me momentarily untethered. I sat near the corner of the room, my thoughts scattered. It was then that I noticed her again, the elder sister standing at the far end of the room. She didn't smile, didn't gesture, but her eyes locked on mine in a way that made my breath hitch. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, she tilted her head toward the side hallway. First I thought I had imagined it. But then she did it again, more deliberately this time. Silent signal. An invitation. My palms grew damp. My instinct screamed at me to stay where I was, to ignore it. She was dangerous, I could feel it. Not dangerous in a physical sense, but in the way of temptation, in the way of secrets that could shatter everything I knew. She was my boss's sister. Nothing good could come from whatever she wanted. And yet, found myself rising. My feet moved almost on their own, carrying me toward the hallway she had indicated. The noise of the party faded as I stepped away from the living room, my heart pounding louder with each step. At the end of the hall, she was waiting, leaning against the wall with quiet confidence. Her lips curved in the faintest of smiles, as though she had known I would come all along. For a moment we said nothing. The silence stretched, heavy with something unspoken. And then she extended her hand, gesturing to the empty chair beside her. "Sit," she said softly, her voice low and deliberate. And I did. I sat down slowly, my pulse hammering in my ears. The sound of the party was muffled here, as if we had stepped into another world, one far quieter and far more dangerous. She stood in front of me now, her posture commanding yet graceful, her eyes sharp but softened by something I couldn't quite name. "I was wondering how long it would take you," she said, almost to herself. I frowned. "What do you mean?" Her lips curved into a faint smile. "To walk over here. To stop pretending you didn't feel me looking at you all night." The words landed heavy. My first instinct was to deny it, to laugh it off as if she were teasing, but the certainty in her gaze pinned me down. She wasn't guessing, she knew. She knew how my stomach had twisted every time our eyes met, how I had tried and failed to ignore her presence. I wasn't sure what you wanted," I admitted, my voice betraying me. "What I want," she repeated, stepping closer. She reached for a crystal glass on the table beside her, swirling the deep red wine as though she were gathering her thoughts. "I want someone who can stand beside me, not beneath me. I want someone who has the courage to step into my world, someone who isn't afraid of power." Her eyes locked with mine again, and for a moment, the intensity made me shrink back into the chair. She seemed too much. Too strong, too certain, too out of reach. And yet, there was something else in her expression. A flicker of weariness, of longing, as though all that power had become a heavy crown. "You don't even know me," I said quietly. She chuckled at that, a low sound that was both amused and sad. "That's where you're wrong. I've known you longer than you realize." My breath caught. "What do you mean?" She set the glass down and walked closer, her heels clicking softly on the polished floor. When she finally stopped in front of me, I could smell her perfume, elegant, understated, intoxicating. She leaned slightly, her voice lowering. "I've watched you. Every time you visited this house, every time you stood beside my sister in meetings. You think no one notices you, but I did. The way you speak, the way you hold yourself. You're not like the others who orbit her for favor. You have your own light. And I wanted it near me." I blinked, stunned. A part of me was flattered, but another part screamed that this was wrong. She was my boss's elder sister, a woman whose name carried weight in every boardroom. "Why me?" "You're exaggerating," I whispered, my voice barely audible. She shook her head slowly, her expression serious now. "I don't exaggerate. I don't waste time on things I don't want. And I want you." The silence between us thickened. My fingers curled in my lap, restless. I didn't know how to respond, because her words were slicing straight through every defense I had. Finally I found my voice. "You said you wanted someone beside you. What does that even mean?" Her eyes softened, and for the first time that evening, the sharp CO exterior slipped just a little. She sat down across from me, leaning forward on her knees. "It means I'm tired. Do you know how lonely it is to build everything, to hold the weight of an empire, and then come home to silence? People look at me and see only success. They don't see that behind the doors, I have no one to share it with. No one who looks at me as a woman instead of a leader." Her words carried an ache I hadn't expected. For a moment, I forgot who she was, the powerful CO everyone feared, and saw instead a woman, vulnerable, human, longing for connection. "But why me?" I asked, the question trembling out before I could stop it. She reached forward then, her hand brushing against mine. The touch was deliberate, electric. "Because you make me feel something. I see honesty in your eyes. I see someone who doesn't flinch when the room is heavy with power. You don't realize it yet, but you belong in my world." I stared at her, caught between disbelief and something else, something far more dangerous. A part of me wanted to pull away, to end this before it spiraled into something I couldn't control. But another part, buried deep, wanted to lean closer, to know what it would feel like to surrender to her certainty. "This isn't right," I murmured, though the conviction was weak. She tilted her head, studying me as though weighing my words. Then she smiled faintly, a sad, knowing smile. "What's right rarely matters when two people are drawn together. You feel it too. Don't deny it." My chest tightened. I wanted to protest, but my silence betrayed me. She could read me too well. The room seemed to shrink around us. The distant hum of the party was barely audible now, drowned out by the rush of my heartbeat. She leaned closer, her hand still brushing against mine, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Prove it," she said softly. "Kiss me." The air left my lungs in a rush. I froze, staring at her, my thoughts colliding in chaos. She wasn't asking casually. It was a command, wrapped in vulnerability. Challenge but also a plea. Everything in me screamed that this was the line, the point of no return. And yet, as her eyes bore into mine, filled with an intensity that was both powerful and desperately human, I knew I was already leaning toward it. I sat frozen, her words echoing in my mind like a dare I wasn't ready to face. "Kiss me." It should have been easy to laugh it off, to dismiss it as the whimsical demand of a powerful woman used to getting her way. But the truth was she wasn't joking. The intensity in her eyes was too raw, too vulnerable for that. It wasn't just a command. It was a revelation of something she had been holding inside for too long. My stomach twisted. I thought of my boss, her younger sister, who had trusted me, given me opportunities, even invited me here tonight. Was this betrayal? Was I crossing a line that I could never come back from? The thought made my palms sweat, my throat tighten. But then there she was, leaning closer, her perfume wrapping around me like an invisible chain, her gaze steady and unflinching. She wasn't blinking, wasn't pulling away. She was daring me. I can't," I whispered, though my voice betrayed more weakness than strength. "You already want to," she replied, her words cutting through me like a blade. "That's why you're still sitting here. If you didn't, you would have walked away." The silence between us thickened, stretching unbearably. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, the ground crumbling beneath me, knowing that if I fell, there would be no going back. And then, almost without realizing it, I leaned in. It was clumsy at first, half reluctant, half curious. My lips brushed hers lightly, awkwardly, as though testing forbidden waters. I meant it to be brief, enough to silence her challenge, enough to convince myself it meant nothing. But the moment we touched, everything shifted. Heat surged between us, quick and electric. She inhaled sharply against my mouth, and before I could retreat, her hand rose to the back of my neck, holding me there. Her kiss deepened, no hesitation in her movements, no room for doubt. What I had meant as a hesitant surrender turned into something consuming. Shock coursed through me. I had never kissed someone like this, not with such a strange mix of guilt and hunger battling inside me. My mind screamed that this was wrong, that I was betraying the woman who had trusted me. But my body betrayed me more. The warmth of her lips, the press of her hand, the low sound she made in her throat, it drew me in, coaxing me past hesitation into something I couldn't deny. I responded, not fully willingly, but not resisting either. Half of me wanted to push her away. The other half wanted more. When we finally broke apart, my chest rose and fell rapidly, breathless. My lips tingled, my heart raced, and I couldn't bring myself to look at her at first. I stared down at my trembling hands, trying to convince myself it hadn't meant anything. But then she laughed softly, a sound filled not with mockery but with triumph. "I knew it," she said, her voice low and satisfied. "I knew you'd feel it too." I finally looked up, and the expression on her face startled me. She wasn't smug exactly, though there was victory there. She looked relieved, as if the weight of months, maybe years, had finally lifted because of this single moment. "You don't understand," I stammered, desperate to pull myself out of the quicksand I had stepped into. "I work for your sister. This isn't what?" she cut in, her tone sharp but not unkind. "Allowed. Expected. Safe." She leaned closer again, her hand brushing mine with deliberate gentleness. "Nothing worth having is safe. And you're worth every risk." I swallowed hard, unable to respond. The walls around me felt smaller, the air heavier. I wanted to tell her to stop, to remind her of the mess this could create. But the look in her eyes made my protest die in my throat. She reached for something on the table beside her, a neat stack of papers, clipped together with precision. Without a word, she placed them in my lap. I looked down, confused, then realized what they were. Job orders. Contracts. My name typed neatly in the header. "I had these prepared," she said softly, almost tenderly, "because I knew this moment would come. You're not just going to be a part of my life. You're going to be part of my world. My company. My partner." My head spun. "You planned this." She smiled faintly, unapologetically. "I don't leave things to chance." The realization hit me like a tidal wave. This wasn't impulsive. She had thought about this, planned for it, waited patiently for me to be exactly where I was now. Every glance tonight, every word, every touch, it had all been leading here. The papers in my lap felt heavy, not just with ink but with the weight of the choice they represented. This was more than a kiss. This was a crossing. My loyalty to my boss felt like a fragile thread in that moment, stretched thin and ready to snap. I knew I couldn't undo what had just happened. The taste of her kiss still lingered on my lips, and the warmth of her hand still burned on my skin. I was hers now, whether I wanted to admit it or not. And as I sat there, staring at the papers, staring at her steady, unyielding gaze, I realized the truth with a shiver. That kiss hadn't just changed tonight. It had changed everything, my career, my loyalty, and maybe even my heart. The morning after the party, I woke with a heaviness in my chest that refused to lift. My reflection in the bathroom mirror felt like that of a stranger, eyes swollen from lack of sleep, lips still tingling faintly with the ghost of her kiss. I had told myself all night, as I tossed and turned, that I would find a way to forget it, bury it under work and silence. But no matter how many times I splashed cold water on my face, the truth was there. I had kissed her. I had let it happen. And I had wanted it. Guilt gnawed at me. Every time I thought of my boss, her trust, her smile when she introduced me at the party as one of my brightest, I felt sick. How could I betray her like this? She had opened doors for me, mentored me, guided me. And yet, in one night, her elder sister had pulled me into a storm I wasn't sure I could survive. Still, there was another feeling that pressed harder against the guilt, excitement. A dangerous thrill that pulsed beneath my skin. The way the CEO had looked at me, the certainty in her voice, the way she spoke as if I already belonged to her. It had ignited something inside me that I had never felt before. For the first time in my life, someone had chosen me with such intensity. My phone buzzed. Message. My breath caught when I saw her name. "I hope you slept." I didn't. "Thinking of you." Just one line. And already my hands were trembling. I should have deleted it. I should have blocked her, cut the thread before it tangled tighter. But instead I read it again, my lips curving despite myself. I typed back before I could think. "I didn't sleep much either." Her reply was instant. "Lunch today. Just us." I hesitated. My rational mind screamed at me to say no, to put an end to whatever this was before it consumed me. But my fingers betrayed me. Where? That afternoon, I found myself sitting across from her in a quiet, dimly lit restaurant tucked away in a part of the city I rarely visited. She looked different out of the formal suit. A softer blouse, her hair loose around her shoulders, but her presence was just as commanding. When she smiled at me, it wasn't the polished smile she gave in boardrooms. It was warmer, real. "You came," she said softly, almost with relief. "I shouldn't have," I admitted. "Maybe not." She leaned in slightly, her eyes never leaving mine. "But you did. And that means something." I wanted to argue, but when the waiter placed wine between us and we started to talk, something shifted. She wasn't the untouchable CEO here, not entirely. She spoke about books she loved, about her travels, about silly mistakes she'd made that never made the headlines. And she laughed. really laughed, the sound filling the space between us until I couldn't help but laugh too. Hours slipped by unnoticed. The guilt still pricked at me, but with every story she shared, every moment she leaned closer, I felt myself softening. She wasn't just power and intimidation. She was human, flawed, lonely, and somehow she had chosen me to let that guard down with. Over the next weeks, our lunches became a pattern. Always discreet, always far from familiar eyes. Sometimes we talked business, but more often we didn't. She showed me the world through her lens, inviting me to quiet galleries, rooftop gardens, hidden wine cellars. She carried the city like it belonged to her, and in her company, I felt as though I belonged too. I couldn't deny it anymore. She made me feel seen in a way my boss never had. My boss valued my work, yes, but with her elder sister, I felt valued as a person. Every word I said seemed to matter. Every glance she gave felt deliberate, charged with something more. One evening she took me to her office late at night. Not the one at my company, but her own headquarters, towering glass walls that overlooked the city lights. She unlocked her private floor and led me through, showing me the empire she had built. "This," she said, standing before the panoramic window, "is what I see every night. All the power, all the success. And yet, when I go home, it means nothing because I have no one to share it with." Her eyes turned to me, searching, heavy with meaning. "But when I imagine you here beside me, it changes everything." The words melted something inside me. I had told myself again and again that this was wrong, that I couldn't let it go further. But standing there in her world, looking at the city reflected in her eyes, I realized I wanted it too. Not just the power or the luxury, though those were intoxicating, but her. The way she made me feel alive, chosen, seen. I should have walked away that night. I should have told her this couldn't continue. But instead, when she brushed a strand of hair from my face, I leaned into her touch. My heart betrayed me before my words could. It was in that moment, clear as the skyline beyond the glass, that I admitted the truth to myself. I was falling for her. The days that followed blurred into a dangerous rhythm. Each morning, I reported to the office as though nothing had changed, keeping my tone professional, my gestures measured, and my face neutral whenever my boss, the younger sister, looked at me. She still treated me with her usual respect, relying on me for tasks and strategies, never suspecting that her own elder sister had already entered my private world in ways I could hardly believe myself. The weight of secrecy pressed down on me, yet it was mixed with a rush that made my heart beat faster. I had stepped into something I should have resisted, but resisting was no longer an option. The CEO, her elder sister, did not wait long before reaching out again. A message would arrive on my phone, short but full of power. "Lunch? My driver will pick you up." Or sometimes, "I need you tonight. Don't say no." Each time I read her words, guilt twisted inside me, but my hands still typed back a yes. I justified it by telling myself it was only business, that her influence could shape my future, but deep inside I knew it wasn't just about career anymore. One afternoon, I met her at a quiet restaurant hidden away in a corner of the city. The moment I walked in, her presence filled the space. She was dressed with the elegance only someone of her stature could carry. Calm, confident, yet with an energy that pulled me like gravity. She smiled when she saw me, and for a moment the world outside disappeared. We spoke about everything. Her latest negotiations, my small achievements at work, even things as ordinary as favorite books. Yet beneath each word lay something unspoken, a fire neither of us was willing to put out. At one point, she leaned closer across the table, her voice dropping lower. "Do you know why I chose you?" she asked. I shook my head, almost too afraid to answer. She reached out, letting her fingers brush against mine, and continued, "Because you're not like the others. You're sharp, disciplined, and yet your eyes. They carry a softness that calls to me. I've admired you from afar for longer than you realize." My chest tightened. Every instinct told me this was wrong, this was betrayal, but the sincerity in her tone made it impossible to push her away. I told myself that maybe it wasn't betrayal yet, not until something more happened, but deep down, I knew that line had already been crossed the night of the first kiss. Later that week, she invited me to her private penthouse. The city glittered below as I stood by the glass wall, my reflection merging with the skyline. She walked up behind me, her presence commanding yet strangely tender. Without asking, she slipped her hand into mine. For a long moment we just stood there, the silence heavy, the electricity between us undeniable. And then, as though pulled by forces beyond control, she turned me toward her. Her eyes searched mine, not with dominance this time, but with raw yearning. I could feel my breath catch as she leaned in. I didn't resist. Our lips met again, softer this time, lingering, as though neither of us wanted to let go. Should have ended there. But it didn't. Soon stolen touches became routine. Quick embraces when no one was watching. Her hand brushing against mine during late-night discussions. My phone lighting up with her messages at odd hours, each one making my pulse quicken. I lived in two worlds, one under the watchful, trusting eyes of my boss, and the other in the intoxicating secrecy of her sister's affection. The danger of being discovered only made it stronger. Once, during a business conference where all three of us were present, the CEO brushed past me in a crowded hall, her hand grazing my waist for just a second. No one else noticed, but I froze, my body trembling from the spark that single touch ignited. My boss stood only a few feet away, talking to a colleague, completely unaware of the storm brewing between us. That night, unable to stop thinking about it, I met the CEO again. She confessed that every moment she spent with me felt like a rebellion against her own loneliness. "I've built empires," she said softly, as we sat side by side on her sofa. "But none of it matters if I have no one to share it with. You've become that person for me." Her vulnerability disarmed me. For someone so powerful to admit such fragility, it struck something deep inside me. And in that moment I gave in fully. I told myself I wasn't just giving in to her wealth or her power, but to the way she made me feel wanted, seen, and chosen. Something my boss, my actual superior, had never made me feel in the same way. The secrecy grew heavier, but so did the bond. I started craving her presence, her messages, her glances. Every time she called me hers, I felt my resistance melt. And though guilt gnawed at me in the quiet hours of the night, the truth was undeniable. I was no longer just caught in an affair of circumstance. I was falling for her. And there was no turning back. The night of the party felt like a lifetime ago. Back then I was just an employee. Dedicated, disciplined, following my boss's orders without ever questioning where life was leading me. I thought I knew my place. I thought my future would be predictable, steady, maybe even dull. But one decision, one glance, one kiss in the shadows had rewritten everything I thought I knew about myself. Now, weeks later, I stood on the balcony of a penthouse I could never have imagined belonging in, watching the city lights shimmer beneath me. And behind me, always behind me, was the presence that had altered my life completely. CO. My boss's elder sister. The woman who had crossed boundaries, who had asked for what she wanted without apology, and who had made me hers. First I told myself it was wrong, that I had betrayed trust, stepped into a forbidden territory I had no right to enter. But the more time I spent with her, the harder it became to believe it was only betrayal. Because she made me feel something I had never felt before. Like I wasn't just a name on a payroll or another face in the crowd, but someone chosen, cherished, and truly seen. I thought of how she had opened her world to me. The luxury dinners, the meetings where she introduced me not as a subordinate but as a partner, the private moments where her strength melted into vulnerability. She was a woman of power, yet with me she was simply human. And that humanity made me fall deeper. Guilt still lingered, especially when I walked into the office each morning and saw my boss, unaware of the storm her sister and I were hiding. But guilt was slowly being replaced by something else. Acceptance. Acceptance that what I felt wasn't just attraction or ambition. It was connection. Real, undeniable, life-altering connection. One evening, she asked me to stay late at her penthouse. The city was unusually quiet, rain streaking down the glass walls in shimmering lines. We sat together on the couch, a silence between us that felt heavier than words. She turned to me, her eyes softer than I'd ever seen them. "Do you regret it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I hesitated. The truth was complicated. Part of me did, because of the betrayal, because of the risks, because of the secret that could destroy so much. But another part of me knew I could never walk away. I shook my head slowly. "No, I don't regret it. Because it gave me you." Her hand found mine, warm and steady. She exhaled, as though she had been holding her breath for years. "I've spent my life building walls. Success, money, control, they kept me safe. But you," she paused, her voice breaking ever so slightly. "You walked right through them without even trying. And for the first time, I don't want to hide behind them anymore." Her words settled deep in my chest, and I realized the transformation wasn't only mine. She too had changed. Beneath her commanding presence was a woman who had been lonely for too long, who had searched for someone to share not just her empire, but her heart. The moment felt fragile, like glass that could shatter if either of us spoke too loudly. So I leaned in, closing the distance not with words, but with the truth of a kiss. It wasn't hurried or stolen like the first one. It wasn't reckless like the ones that followed. This kiss was slow, deliberate, filled with everything we had both been too afraid to admit. When we pulled apart, I whispered the words that had been burning inside me for weeks. I didn't just find a career. I found someone who touched my soul. Her eyes glistened. She held me as though letting go would mean losing everything. In that embrace, I understood that infidelity wasn't just about betrayal, it was about choices. Choices that blurred the line between right and wrong, choices that rewrote destinies. I had chosen her, and she had chosen me. The rain outside grew heavier, the city lost behind a curtain of water, but inside the world felt still. We were no longer just CEO and employee, no longer just sister secrets. We were two women who had collided in a way neither could have predicted, and now neither wanted to undo. But in the back of my mind the question lingered, the question that would never leave. Was this truly love, or was it only betrayal dressed as passion? Could something born in secrecy ever survive in the light? I didn't know the answer. All I knew was that, for the first time in my life, I felt alive. And that was enough for now.